I think they might hit exactly 48. I don't think they'll go over 50, to be honest. 48, 49, bro.
All right, so if the West looking like a 50-win minimum, a 50-win requirement to make the playoffs, that means that, man, LeBron not making the playoffs. That means the Lakers are not making the playoffs. That's all I gotta say, bro. That's all I gotta say. And I'm gonna tell you right now, if LeBron cannot lead that team to the playoffs, bro, I don't want to hear not a thing, bro. I don't want to hear nothing else.
That is gonna be like a slight, man.
That's gonna be a massive slight. What's up, YouTube? It's the one and only legend of winning, aka Low, and I'm back with another video. Now, ever since the 2016 NBA Finals, the conversation between who is the greatest player of all time has really ramping up between LeBron James and Michael Jordan. And I must admit, LeBron James and what he has accomplished throughout his career is pretty doggone impressive. And I also want to say that it has been a privilege to watch his career in its totality. Now, when it comes to the GOAT argument, many people have numerous ways to debate what side they heavily favor. However, over the past several years now, one thing I have consistently noticed between both sides is how frequently people tend to embellish and, quite frankly, just bold-faced lie about what one player did or didn't accomplish, and even some people have gone as far as to belittle what both Michael Jordan and LeBron James has accomplished, despite the fact that, again, it's just factually incorrect. And because of this, in today's video, what I decided to do was shed some light on the 3 biggest lies told about Michael Jordan in his career, not necessarily because I believe Michael Jordan is the greatest player of all time, but because it's really getting out of hand how much people disrespect Michael Jordan and his legacy just because they want to see LeBron James as the greatest player of all time.
How did Jordan get past the bad boy Pistons? They got old.
Who did Jordan have to go through? The Celtics, the Pistons. His won their first title against the Lakers.
That's just not going to cut it, Stephen A. Smith. And quite frankly, this is a consistent lie that many older fans continue to perpetuate. Michael Jordan never beat the Boston Celtics en route to win a championship because by the time the Chicago Bulls were winning the championships in the 90s, the Boston Celtics had already fallen off and Larry Bird was either on the brink of retiring or had already retired. And then when it comes to the Lakers, they were far from being the Showtime Lakers as Kareem Abdul-Jabbar and Michael Cooper had already retired, and then Magic Johnson was towards the tail end of his career. But then on the flip side, a way more consistent lie that I hear in the NBA community is that Michael Jordan didn't beat the bad boy Pistons until they got old.
How did Jordan get past the bad boy Pistons? They got old. The year he finally beat them, they were a 48-win mediocre team.
I'm sorry for the people out there who attempt to use Nick Wright's talking points for some level of credibility in these conversations, but he is completely incorrect. The Detroit Pistons, when they lost to the Chicago Bulls, were a 50-win team, not 48. They finished with the 4th-ranked defense and the 12th-ranked offense in the NBA, and they were able to accomplish all of that with Isaiah Thomas missing nearly half of the season. Also keep in mind that Joe Dumars and Dennis Rodman, they were in their prime, as Joe Dumars not only was an all-star but was an all-NBA player and was selected to the all-defensive team. And then when it comes to Dennis Rodman, not only was he selected to the all-defensive team, but he was coming off a season where he won his 2nd Defensive Player of the Year award. And so with that information, I'm pretty sure you thoroughly understand the Detroit Pistons, they were far from being quote-unquote old. But if you just want to know how old some of those players were from the 91 Pistons, Isaiah Thomas and Dennis Rodman, they were 29. Joe Dumars was 27. Mark Aguirre, 31. And the rest of the other players such as Vinnie Johnson, Bill Laimbeer, they ranged between the age of 33 to 35. Yes, they were old, however, they were role players. The better players on the roster, they weren't even in their 30s yet. To put this into context, when Michael Jordan faced them in 1991, he was 27. Literally 2 years younger than Isaiah Thomas and Dennis Rodman and the same age as Joe Dumars. But if we were to use this same level of ill-informed criticism for LeBron in his career, you will start to recognize that LeBron James, he didn't beat the Celtics until they got old, he didn't beat the Spurs until they were old, and when LeBron beat the Pistons in 2007, Chauncey Billups was 30, so I guess that's old if Isaiah Thomas was old at 29. Rasheed Wallace was 32, that's definitely old if Joe Dumars at 27 is old. And Ben Wallace, well, Ben Wallace wasn't even on that team. The Pistons already replaced Ben Wallace with Chris Webber, who is 33 years old, which is definitely older than a 29 in his prime Dennis Rodman.
Yeah, the one guy scores a few more, but geez, I got in the right. He appears to be way better.
Now, another common lie that many people have been spreading around the NBA community about Michael Jordan is that he was just a quote-unquote scorer. And the reason why people come to these conclusions is because they blindly compare stats, and they look at Michael Jordan's rebound and assist numbers and conclude that they're nowhere near as close as Larry Bird, so that means that he's just not an all-around great player. Now, let's pause for a second and let's just get the obvious out the way. Even if you were to exclude Michael Jordan's scoring ability, at bare minimum you would still get an elite defensive player, easily one of the greatest perimeter defenders the league has ever seen. And the reason why people overlook this is because many people just look at points, rebounds, and assists, and because those numbers don't necessarily correlate to defense, they can't come to any conclusion, which again just shows how ignorant a lot of people are when they're having these conversations. Furthermore, when we're having a conversation about Michael Jordan and his numbers in comparison to LeBron, Larry Bird, and Magic Johnson, we also must keep in mind the position and height of these players. Michael Jordan is a 6'6" shooting guard. Why is it that anybody is expecting him to grab more rebounds than players who are 6'9" and taller? And then when it comes to Larry Bird and LeBron James, they're both forward to spend a good handful of their careers at the power forward position. Of course, those players should be grabbing more rebounds than Michael Jordan. They're taller and play positions that are more prone to grabbing rebounds. Furthermore, I find it pretty ironic that the same people who criticize Michael Jordan for not having the same rebounding and assist numbers as other great players throughout NBA history are the same people who attempt to criticize Michael Jordan for the amount of help that he received throughout his career due to the fact that he was coached by Phil Jackson, without understanding that the numbers that represented Michael Jordan in his box score is a reflection of the style of play that was demanded of him in the triangle offense when again he was coached by Phil Jackson. And for those out there who don't believe me, you can just look at the season right before Phil Jackson was a head coach for the Chicago Bulls, and you will clearly see why not only having the responsibility of being a scorer and a defender, but also having the responsibility of being a ball handler and a facilitator, Michael Jordan ended that season averaging 32.5 points, 8 rebounds, 8 assists, nearly 3 steals, while shooting great from the field. But again, before we even get this deep into this conversation, if you were to take away Michael Jordan's scoring ability, you would still be left with one of the greatest perimeter defenders in NBA history. So again, it's just factually incorrect.
Here's MJ being guarded by an off-duty mall cop. And of course, he gets right into the paint, just gets an easy layup.
And finally, we have one of the more talked about lies in the NBA community over the past several months now about Michael Jordan and the players that defended him throughout his career. Now, when this narrative started to be pushed around in the NBA community, especially on Twitter, from my understanding, it started off as a meme. However, as time continued to progress, more and more people picked up on this belief that only players such as Danny Ainge and Craig Elo were directly guarding Michael Jordan, which is factually incorrect. And the reason why this belief started to spread like wildfire is because a lot of people on Twitter are just younger users who are not completely aware of the dominant defensive guards throughout the 90s. So that has definitely led a lot of people to ask me personally, who were some of the better defenders throughout the 80s and 90s who were directly guarding Michael Jordan. But just so this video isn't too long, here are just 8 to 10 players who guarded Michael Jordan throughout the 80s or 90s, or both through the 80s and 90s. Michael Cooper, Albert Robinson, Sidney Moncrief, Derek Harper, Dan Marley, Dennis Rodman, Nate McMillan, Paul Presti, Gary Payton, and Joe Dumars. Every player that I've named has made multiple all-defensive teams. Every player that I've named outside of Michael Cooper and Derek Harper have matched up against Michael Jordan in their prime in the playoffs or in the NBA Finals. And almost every player that I just named has finished as high as 3rd in a Defensive Player of the Year voting at some point in their career. Many of these players that I've named have won Defensive Player of the Year awards as well. And for the people out there who are wondering, every player that I just named, outside of Gary Payton and Dennis Rodman, played the shooting guard position. And the biggest reason why I decided to put Dennis Rodman and Gary Payton in this conversation as well is because in very pivotal moments in both their careers and Michael Jordan's career, they were left with the responsibility of guarding Michael Jordan, both in the postseason. So it's not like Michael Jordan was just blowing by Craig Elo and Danny Ainge in every single round of the playoffs every year. No, he matched up with legit all-time great defensive players at his position throughout his entire career. And with that being said, people, hopefully you learn a little bit more about Michael Jordan and his career, and hopefully you are a little bit more inept and adequate when it comes to the conversation and the debate between Michael Jordan and LeBron and who is the greatest player of all time. And if that is the case, then I did my job. And until next time, I'll see you all later. Peace.